Hello! This tutorial is going to be the first in a series of tutorials that goes over the process of me making a game called Simon. Simon, if you're not familiar with it, is a game that was created clearly in 1978, as Wikipedia says here. But basically you have this plastic circle and it has 4 buttons on it. You would turn it on and each button would light up in a sequence and you'd have to repeat the sequence. If you didn't do it in time or you did it wrong, then it would start over. Each time you did the sequence, it would get a little faster and add another button to the round. So the level of progression got constantly harder until it was basically impossible to do. So the first time it might go green, red, yellow. And so you hit green, red, and then yellow, and then it starts over and it says red, blue, yellow, green. Then it has 4, and it highlights each button at a certain speed. Every time you get it right, it highlights the buttons just a little bit faster the next time and adds 1 button. It should be fairly straightforward. It's a fairly simple game, although it's never good to underestimate any project, as they can get complex pretty quickly. Planning is key. However, I'm not going over planning right now. I'm just going to go over how to get started prototyping something like this, and hopefully in future tutorials I will do something on planning. So I'm going to go ahead and say Simon tutorial, and I had 3D selected. I just hit create project. I'm using Unity 5.5. I'm trying to get more and more experience with the latest version of Unity. I usually at work stick with 5.3.3, but this tutorial shouldn't be limited to any particular version of Unity. So just to get started here, I'm going to create a couple of folders down here in my assets. I'm going to go ahead and move this over. Now, a couple tutorials ago, if you've been watching my tutorials, I did set up my Unity layout, and I never saved it. So there's a button up here on the right that says Layouts. You can just hit Save Layouts. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, I capitalized the A. I'm just going to delete that one there. Delete layout. And actually, there's Dan's workspace. I'll go ahead and use that one. But the point is, you can save your layout and it'll recall it. So I kind of like this whole layout where I have items. I have my hierarchy and my inspector on the right side, my console and my project on the bottom, and my game and my scene here in the middle. Okay, so down here on the bottom left, make sure I have my projects tab selected. I'm going to go ahead and right click in the assets, hit create folder. I'm going to create a scripts folder. I'm going to do this again, create folder. I'm going to create a materials folder. I'm going to right click again. Whoops, wrong button. I'm going to right click again, hit create folder. And I will create a scenes folder. Those are the 3 I think I need right now. As I work through this, I'll add more surely. So I'll go ahead and first hit Control S to save my scene. And I'm just going to call this prototype. As you start working in Unity, you can create as many scenes as you want. You can create a scene for every little thing, and a lot of times making your scene just for a specific thing is extremely helpful. So you could have a scene that's just for testing out buttons, for example. So now just to get started here, I'm going to try and speed through this. I'm going to add 4 cubes, and each one is going to be a button. I want to make this the red button. I'm going to hit Control D. I'm going to have the blue button. Hit Control D again. Make the green button. And finally Control D, and this will be the yellow button. And there's a W in yellow. So there we go. I'm going to organize this a little bit. I'm going to create an empty object. Make sure it's in the root of the hierarchy. And I'm going to call this buttons. Now I'm hitting F2 to rename it. You can select anything, hit F2, and it'll let you rename it. If you're on a PC, if you're on a Mac, I think you just have to hit Enter. Or you can always go up to the input field on the top right in the inspector, and you can rename it up here. So Go ahead and grab all these buttons, make sure they're zeroed out. So let's hit reset. You click on this little cog up here. You hit reset and it'll reset their transform positions. Now they've moved again because my empty game object is not zeroed out. So I'm going to go ahead and zero everything out again. So there we go, everything's zeroed out. I'm going to move my red and blue buttons to the left side. I'll move them negative 1.5. I'll move my green and yellow buttons to the right, positive 1.5. And I will move my green and red buttons up 1.5. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my camera, and I'm going to scoot that in a lot. So it's at negative 10 in the Z right now. I'm going to try negative 4. So there we go. My buttons are kind of far apart. So maybe I want to bring them in a little bit. Let's do that. Negative 1. And these will be positive 1. And maybe green and red will be 1. 1's too little. Let's say 1.25. Okay, so there we have our buttons. Now our buttons are not looking the right, they don't have the right colors, so let's go ahead and create some materials here. I'll create one material. I'll call this red button material. So there we go. I'll duplicate it 4 times. Again, we'll rename this to green. And let's take that one off. Let's rename this one to blue. And let's rename this one to yellow. So there we go. We'll go ahead and drag the materials on each button. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. And hopefully we got this right. Blue button here. Let's grab this, make that blue. Let's grab this one. Make it green. Ooh, that's really bright green. Now you can see I made a mistake here. 2 objects are assigned to the green. So let's make this the yellow. So I'll make this yellow. I just dragged on the yellow material there. And let me make the yellow. Now this one, hopefully, this one says green. It should be red. So there's another mistake. It's late. I'm tired. So let's go ahead and drop the green on here. Make this green. There we go. So now we have all our buttons. I'm not going to get into the details of changing states right now. So we're going to just assume one state, and I'll do things like changing state in another tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and create a really simple script here. I'm going to call this, let's call this Simon button. Go ahead and load Visual Studio. Now, Simon button is going to need at least, at the very least, I like to have a reference to the camera, and I like to have a ray. So this is going to be a reference to the main camera. I'll just go ahead and reference to main camera. Now this will be a reference to our mouse / finger / fire press position. So what's going to happen here is in 3D space, once I click on screen space, I'm going to shoot a ray from that point anywhere I click on the screen. So if I click down here, I'm going to shoot a ray straight off into positive Z space all the way back to see if it hits anything. And if it hits something, then I'm going to return that object as hit. So camera, let's say cam equals camera.main. So this Unity gives us the current camera. So that's just a nice little function. It's a static property of the camera class. Returns the camera that's in use right now, or the camera that's tagged with main. I don't remember exactly, but if you go up here You can see there's a tag main camera. That's what it's returning there. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to check in the update every time Unity runs through its update cycle. I'm going to check if input.get get button down, and this takes a string fire1, and we'll go ahead and debug log someone pressed the fire button. Now what this is doing is this is returning a mapped key. Unity has a series of mapped keys that you can reassign, and you can do this in script, or you can do this in the editor. And it's up here under Edit, Project Settings, Input. You can see all of these properties here. Fire1 is one of the properties, the one that we're using. Fire1 is joystick button 0. It's also a key or a mouse button. I think it's also a touch point. So if you have a touch screen, I think Fire1 will take on a touch. Or you may have to use the touch class for touches. I'm not sure. But in this case, we're going to use Fire1. And this is going to be in lieu of our left mouse button. Or it's going to map to our left mouse button. So I went ahead and wrote this script. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to grab my red button. I'm going to make sure I have my scripts directory open there. I'm going to grab my red button, and I'm going to drop this Simon button on it. Okay, hit play. Make sure I'm in the console tab here. I'm going to press down. Now this is picking up on presses anywhere on the screen. You can see it says someone pressed the fire button. It's kind of nice. So there we go. Now we can come in here and we can get a little more detailed. We can set our ray equal to cam.screen point to ray. You can see it's the first thing that's recommended. It wants a position. I'm going to give it the input mouse position. And I'm going to say if, actually I'm going to create something called a hit, a raycast hit. I'll call this hit. And what raycast hit is, it's an object that returns anything that the ray collides with when I do a check for a collision with the raycast. So physics dot raycast, and I'll give it my ray. I can give it a distance, or I can give it my hit. I'm going to say out hit. The reason why I use the word out is because out is passed in as a reference to this raycast method. So what's going to happen here is that out comes into the raycast method. I'm sorry, hit comes into the raycast method. The raycast method fills it with data, and then it's available outside of the method immediately with all that data, as opposed to having to return a class or an object with all that data in it. So now if my raycast hits something, then I will debug log, and I'm just going to change the color here. Color equals green. We hit an object. And there we go. So I'll go ahead. And again, Unity compiles everything right away. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to see if I hit something. Up. Yep, I hit something. So someone pressed the fire button. We hit an object. I'll click out here. Someone pressed the fire button. We haven't hit an object. So now I can go ahead and hit anything here. Hit an object. Okay. So you can see this script isn't really just for the button that we're hitting, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? So if I say hit dot transform dot game object dot name, then we can see what object. So I'm basically checking the hit object that's returned here, or that's been filled up by the raycast method, and checking its transform dot game object dot name. Since I named each one of these objects, I should get the names back with red, green, blue, yellow. So I'm going to try that again. Okay, I'm not hitting anything. Click on this. We hit an object, the blue button. We hit an object, the yellow button. Hit an object, the red button. Why is that the red button? Oh, look at that. So I've mislabeled our buttons. So this one is the green button. This one is the red button. This one is the blue button. So I have the blue and the red transposed. This one's yellow. So I can go ahead and switch these. I'll say this one's the blue, and this one is the red. Okay, go ahead and hit play again. Okay, we hit the blue button, hit the red button, hit the yellow button, hit the green button. Great. Now, just for the heck of it, I'll go ahead and see if we can do something with the material. So basically, I might want to do something that either brightens the button a little bit when we hit it, and maybe does it for a couple seconds, and then returns it back to its original color. So let's give it a shot. So if we hit this object, we want to start a coroutine, change obj color, and we'll send in the hit.transform get component material. Now you can see I'm getting the red squiggly here because I haven't created this coroutine. So I went ahead and hit Control period and then hit enter, and it created the coroutine for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the material.color to, let's just change it to a random color. Let's make it black just for the sake of this. Color.black, and we'll come back and we'll turn this into its color, but more saturated later. So I'm going to yield, return new, wait for seconds, and I'm going to wait for 1 second. And I will need a reference to its original color. Original color equals material.color. So then, after a second, I'm going to set its material color back to original color. So we've gone ahead and done that. I'll go back into Unity, and I'll hit play. And we're missing a component. There is no material attached to the blue button. That's interesting, because there is a material attached to the blue button. So maybe what we have to do is reference it through the renderer. .material. Let's try that. So again, this process of going back and forth between scripts is really helpful. You can see the errors right there in the console. You can debug log everything that you wanna see, and it gives you a really quick. So let me go back and just show you another way that you could have tried to debug this. If I had just put this in here, well, let's undo everything here. So yeah, I'm sending the material in right now. So let's say I just had that code right there. I hit play. I clicked on one of these things. I see this error message come up in my console window. Well, it has all this information. You may first of all, you may be looking at the top portion and wondering, okay, that's great. It gives me some information on what's wrong, but how do I know where to go? Well, there are two really nice things about this debug console. One is that down here it gives you the stack trace of all the methods that it went through in order to try and fire off this functionality. So you can see here it's simonbutton.cs line 27. It started a coroutine next, and then up here it's still in the coroutine, but this is a separate class, and then it goes back to simonbutton36. So this is probably where it yields and waits, and then it comes up here, and tries to execute more code. Anyway, so all of this here is really valuable. You can go down and kind of look through and see what the game engine's actually doing. But if you just want to get to the script right away and try and fix it, you can just double click there on the error message, and it'll take you right to the line of code where the error is happening. So it took me right to line 36 right here, which is nice. Okay, so I can see that there's something wrong with this. If I wanted to go even further, I could just add a breakpoint here in Visual Studio, hit attach to Unity, and then once I see there's an orange outline, I can go back into Unity3D. I can click on an object, and I can see it brings me here, highlights this line, and then I can say, okay, I want to know why it says missing component down here. It says missing component exception, so I can start to drag my mouse over different variables, and I can see, okay, this material that's coming in just isn't working here. It's giving me all sorts of errors, so it must be with this material. And then I know I sent it in up here, so I can go ahead and try and fix it that way. And we already know what the fix is. We switched it to render.material, and that worked. So that's kind of a useful technique to debugging your code and your projects as you're working on them. It's really good to kind of jump back and forth on a regular basis. It also helps in saving your progress and understanding where you're getting. So not getting too far ahead of yourself. Because you could write a lot of code and then end up realizing that none of it works pretty far down the line and have to redo it. So there we go. I'm going to leave it at that right now, and we can pick this up hopefully later this week. I'll continue building out this Simon game. I guess Simon Says it's a different game. Okay, I hope this was interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.